Hi guys, the purpose of this video is to go through how to convert using moles and molar mass and atoms. We'll be using this periodic table, so make sure you have one in front of you. So really fast, the mole concept is used in chemistry based off of the research from Mr. Avogadro, and through looking at gases and everything. A mole is just, it's like a dozen. It's a counting number. And so you can say if you have 1 mole of any element, you have 6.02 times 10 to the 23 atoms of it, whether it's carbon, helium, sulfur, whatever. 1 mole of anything is that many atoms of that element, just like a dozen. A dozen donuts is 12. A dozen books is 12. 1 mole is that many atoms. And based off of the research done with the carbon atom, this is based off of carbon, and carbon having 1 carbon atom having a mass of 1. So 1 mole of any element has that many atoms. Also, if you have 1 mole of an element, it equals the atomic mass on the periodic table in grams. So looking at my periodic table right here, if I have 1 mole of boron, it's going to equal 10.182 grams. If I have 1 mole of magnesium, it's going to equal 24.305 grams. So 1 mole equals 6.02 times 10 to the 23 atoms, but it also equals that atomic mass on the periodic table in grams. And these are 2 equivalencies that allow us to convert units. And the way we're going to convert units is using dimensional analysis. Okay, and so let's get started. So I want to know how many moles of carbon are in 26 grams of carbon. So just like before, when you did dimensional analysis, we're going to start with our given, which is 26 grams of carbon. So looking at my units, I want to go from grams to moles. And to go from grams to moles, I'm going to use this conversion. 1 mole of an element equals the atomic mass on the periodic table. So we go find carbon. Carbon is right here. It's number 6. It has a mass of 12.011. And I'm going to write that off to the side. So that means 1 mole of carbon equals 12.011 grams. Now, something that you are probably not going to enjoy, but it really helps later on in the year. When you write your unit, you need to write the unit mole, and you also need to write the element. Because right now, you're just doing conversions of carbon, but later on in the year, you'll go from like carbon to carbon dioxide or something, and so you really need to label what your element is. So I have my equivalency. 1 mole is 12.011 grams. So let's set up our dimensional analysis. We start with our given, 26 grams of carbon. And I want to change that to moles using this conversion. I need to get rid of the gram unit, and I can put a 1 over this. So I will use this at the bottom, 12.011 grams of carbon. And that equals 1 mole of carbon. Now I have canceled out my grams of carbon, and all I'm left with is the unit moles of carbon, which is what the problem wanted. And so we solve 26 times 1 divided by 12.011. And when I plug that into the calculator, I get 2.16 moles of carbon. Now with significant figures, 26 grams has 2 significant figures, so I'm going to change that to be 2.2 moles of carbon. And that's how you solve a mole problem. Just really fast, you might have noticed right here I wrote moles as MOL. You will see moles abbreviated MOL frequently. I don't know, writing an E is just a lot of work. But you can write MOLE or MOL. You will see MOL though written for mole. Don't let that freak you out. Okay. Our next problem, what's the mass of 0.488 moles of sodium? So this time we're starting with moles and we want to convert it to mass. We go to our periodic table and we go find sodium. It is right here, number 11. That mass, 22.990, that in grams equals 1 mole of sodium. And so let's write that out. 1 mole of sodium, which is Na, not S, equals that number, 22.990 grams of sodium. So I have my conversion. I'm looking for mass, which mass is grams, if you did not know that. I have my moles. Now we can set it up. We start always with our given. So 0.488 moles of sodium. I want to go to grams of sodium, so I need to get rid of my mole unit. I'll use 1 mole of sodium first, and I'm going to put that at the bottom. That way moles of sodium cancels out. And then up top we write what it equals, which is 22.990 grams of sodium. Now let's double check. Moles of sodium cancel out. I'm left with grams of sodium, which is the unit that I wanted. We go plug this into the calculator and we get that you have 11.219 grams of sodium. And then for significant figures, 0.488 has 3 sig figs. And then when I look at my molar mass, something I should point out, this 22.990, that's a rounded number. That's not exact. So we do take those significant figures into account, but 22.990 is 5 sig figs. So 3 sig figs for my 0.488 is a smaller number, so my answer should have 3 sig figs, which makes that 11.2 grams of sodium. That's my final answer. Okay, next one. How many atoms are in 2.5 moles of silver? So this time I want to solve for atoms. If I go back, the conversion for atoms is 1 mole of an element equals 6.02 times 10 to the 23 atoms of that element. So this is the conversion we'll use on this problem. So 1 mole of silver. Silver, just by the way, is Ag, equals that number, 6.02 times 10 to the 23 atoms of silver. So there's my conversion. We start our dimensional analysis with our given, 2.5 moles. I have moles, and you can write a 1 underneath this if you want, right here. So I'm going to use 1 mole of silver at the bottom. That cancels out moles of silver. And on the other side, you write what 1 mole of silver equals, which is 6.02 times 10 to the 23 atoms. And then moles Ag cancel out, and we're left with the unit atoms of silver, which is what we wanted. And then you just go type this in, 2.5 times 6.02 times 10 to the 23, all divided by 1. And when I type that in, I get 1.505 times 10 to the 24. Now we need to round this to have 3 significant figures. 1.505, that's 4 sig figs, so that would become 1.51 times 10 to the 24 atoms of silver. And then our last problem. How many atoms are in 1.34 grams of silicone? And I'm going to find atoms, so let's write our conversions really fast. We just did on our last problem, 1 mole equals 6.02 times 10 to the 23 atoms. Okay, so that's one conversion we're going to use, but looking at this problem, I have grams of silicone. So we need to go to our periodic table. And we find silicone, it's number 14. It has a molar mass of 28.086. So let me come back here, and that means 1 mole equals 28.086 grams of silicone. And then we can set up our dimensional analysis. So we start with our given 1.34 grams of silicone times, I'm starting with grams, so I need to use this conversion that has grams first. So I can get rid of the grams unit. I've got grams up top, so grams go at the bottom. 28.086 grams of silicone, and that equals 1 mole of silicone. So I've gotten rid of my gram unit, now I have moles. I don't want moles, I want my answer to be in atoms. So I will use this second conversion next. And to set this up, I've got 1 mole right here, so I'm going to put 1 mole at the bottom. And 1 mole of silicone has 6.02 times 10 to the 23 atoms. And now to type this into the calculator. If you remember when I taught you dimensional analysis, you want to multiply everything across the top together, and then you divide it by what's at the bottom. So multiply the top, and then divide it by what's at the bottom. So pause the video, type this in, make sure you're typing it in correct, and you should end up getting 2.87 times 10 to the 22 atoms of silicone. Now, really fast, as you're watching this video, you might be thinking, why do I have to write 1 mole here and 1 mole here? Can't I just skip writing 1 mole and combine these two conversions? You can. However, and it would not mathematically change the answer at all, because 1 mole and 1 mole don't affect it. Later on, I teach you to do it this way, and I do not want you to skip writing 1 mole, because later on in the year, when we learn stoichiometry, I know, big word, it's not going to be 1 mole. It might be 2 moles, 3 moles, 4 moles. And so if you skip writing 1 mole right now, you're just setting yourself up for failure later on. So please write this the way I taught you. Write that 1 mole. It takes half a second. It's really not going to waste any time. You will survive and be fine. And just trust me, it makes life easier later on.